Hey everybody, this is Sarah Whitaker.
And Salty Dalty.
Here for Working the World, episode 14, Wrestling Bloodlines.
Well, the only thing I can go ahead and do before we go ahead and get started is actually take one finger up that we can show on TV. Like this.
Oh yeah. Man, we got so many bloodlines in professional wrestling and families and just how much history that goes into each one of these ones. I mean, it's just amazing that it just stays within these royal bloodlines. And
Yeah.
like the song says, there's more than one wrestling bloodline in professional wrestling.
There's more than one royal family in professional wrestling, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think, in your opinion, is the premier wrestling bloodline in the industry?
As of right now, or of all time?
Why not both?
Well, let's before we get into that, let's also get into the jargon of the day.
Good point.
Because you can't really describe a bloodline without knowing the concept of the promoter's kid.
Yep.
Because it's a bit of a stigma, especially with Daddy Said Sell.
George Goulas.
George Goulas.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, there was this one promoter in Tennessee by the name of Nick Goulas, who was known for being one really cheap, stingy SOB, who, worst payoff man regarded in the history of the business. And everybody in Memphis grew up with George because he would always, at the end of the broadcast, say, "George, go to bed," on the air. I'm not joking. Then, when George finally graduated high school, I think he went to college too, it's time for George to finally break in. And George was about 6'6", 220 pounds, but he didn't really look physically imposing whatsoever. His stuff didn't look good in the ring, and he was always getting lost and getting, a little bit behind on where he should be in the business. But he got in that main event spot because his daddy pushed him, simply. And that whole term, Daddy Said Sell, he actually had a world heavyweight title match with Harley Race, I think in 1977 in maybe Louisville or Memphis. And that's when Harley just had, it's like, I'm just sick of working with this guy. I'm kind of like what Brody did with Luger in the cage, just stop selling. And George, that was kind of like the version of it where, like, the embellished version, it's like, Daddy said sell, Daddy said sell. It was more like, my daddy told me you sell for me, what's going on? So it was that stinking bad of a match. So nothing against George Goulas, but at the same time, that's where the stigma, for the most part, really, really peaked. So, but then again, you also had other promoters' kids that were really good workers. Like, obviously, a lot of the Harts were. So.
And Shane McMahon. Greg Gagne was a good worker, just not really a top guy. But there were lots of promoters' kids in that whole group, in that whole generation, that were either on one side of the fence or the other. Right. So we're talking about the ones that aren't necessarily promoters' kids, but the ones that actually solidified a dynasty.
Right. So, well, there's actually one family of promoters' kids that actually did start a dynasty, and a lot of their family members are still working today, and that's the Von Erichs.
Mm.
Yep, the Fritz's grandchildren, like Lacey and couple other of them. I think Ross is one of them that's in business now. But yeah, they're all third generation right now. Their dad owned the promotion in Dallas, World Class Championship Wrestling, and all the Von Erichs, except for maybe Chris and maybe Mike, were really regarded as good workers. But it's just one of them deals where it's like that family. I haven't seen the movie The Iron Claw yet. I want to. But it's just, that was a really, really unfortunate series of events that family
as a whole went through was even when, you know, just the whole situation after David passing away and then going. It's
Right.
just, yeah, that's why it's hard for me to watch. It's like, yeah.
Well, especially going about dynasties and whatnot, let's go back to as far back as we could possibly get. Now, which would you say was the earliest family that decided to make their mark in professional wrestling?
Oh, the McMahons, no question about it.
That far back?
5 generations of, well, actually, yeah, 4 generations of McMahons in the industry, because it actually started not with Vince McMahon Sr., but his father, Jess McMahon, who was a promoter of boxing and wrestling in the New York area. And then when Jess passed away, that was in like the 1890s, early 1900s, maybe the 1910s, somewhere in there, where I think Jess actually got started on there. Then it went to Vince Sr., then of course Jr., and now Stephanie and Triple H. And of course, you know, we've been hearing rumors and such that Vince actually might be coming back for his own company. And it's like, I don't know exactly how I feel about that, so I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. But going back there, they actually kind of were integral in starting the whole wrestling business as we know it up in the Northeast. But it's just one of them deals where, whew, you want to talk about going back and being an OG, McMahon family is kind of like the OGs as far as like wrestling bloodlines. Then again, you can't go ahead and talk bloodlines without talking the Samoan dynasty either.
Right. I was about to get, I mean, because it's like, especially with, we got the Guerreros from Mexico. We have the Samoan dynasty, which has several tree branches to go from.
Yep.
And then the Hearts from Canada. I mean, it's just
It's a giant dynasty sandwich. So you get them on both sides of our borders here. People coming from north, people coming from south, immigrating here to actually make their name. So
right. I know Japan has a lot of like especially like Tiger Mask 1, 2, and 3. I mean, it's not a bloodline. They're less into bloodline dynasties and more into like character dynasties.
yes, yeah, kind of like well, the first Tiger Mask was Sammy Lee, Sayama, and then you had Misawa as the second one. I can't remember who Tiger Mask 3 and 4 are. So, but those first 2 Tiger Masks really actually left a pretty indelible impact in Japan. But then again, you could make the case that Misawa actually went and took that and just used that as his foot in door to kind of go and do his own thing, because he was like Baba's boy after Jumbo had kind of had his run in All Japan and kind of became that anointed one when he had the mask come off in Japan. He had, he actually worked with Saruda, and I think Saruda might have put him over. They had a finish, but working with Saruda actually made him in Japan. But, you know, he got his foot in the door by being that gimmick. In Japan. That kind of gave him that foundation to where he could go ahead and go on his own, be the top guy in all Japan, as well as start Pro Wrestling Noah as well, so rest Misawa's soul. Only one of the privileges that I could go ahead and say that he probably was, if he were still here, he'd be most proud of, is one of the few wrestlers that actually passed away in the ring. And I tell you what, it's like, knowing him, I heard some people say it's like he wouldn't have it any other way, because that's how much he loved this business. So.
But going back to the Samoans, I mean, how far back do they go?
To about the 40s and 50s, I would say, because the first one to really make his name here would be Haichi Pierre Maivia. And he was kind of the first one guy to get his run on top and be a, you know, kind of be one of the first, in the wrestling business, and they're referred to as the Island Boys. one of the first ones of that lineage to kind of come over here and make a name for themselves and become a really good worker and all that. But again, you also had King Curtis Iakia. He's not a part of the wrestling bloodline, but he was one of those few that actually was able to come over and become a really fabulous worker. Because actually, King Curtis is actually, I think, more notorious for being a great personality out of the ring than even in the ring, especially with his cosmic cookies, as they're referred to. Been the source of many a rip.
Pardon me.
Gotta educate people in the future on another episode about those cosmic cookies.
Cosmic cookies.
Mm-hmm. We'll leave it at that. So what other dynasties come to mind? I mean, we were just talking about the Samoans. Actually, let's go ahead and stick on them for just a second.
Okay.
Because look at all the people and, generations that have followed through in each generation that have kind of surpassed the last one, because it seems like it's every generation just seems to top the last one as far as like athletic ability or psychology or charisma or whatnot, or just getting the big run on top.
Yeah, because especially with you have people like The Rock, you have Yokozuna, who was Samoan instead of Japanese.
Yeah, but actually, funny story. You know how Yoko got stuck with that gimmick? Sergeant Slaughter actually gave it to him, and here's why. Vince, they wanted to bring him in, and Vince's like, yeah, he's a great worker, he's got a unique look and all that, but I already have 6 Samoans as is, and he's just going to be, getting lost in a shuffle if I bring him in. And it's like, well, let's go ahead and find a way for him to stand out.
Pardon.
You are pardoned. But I was going to say, it's like, well, let me go ahead and think of a way. Well, he's got this massive sumo wrestler. We've never had that before. Let's go ahead and try that. And the thing got over so daggum good that they actually put the belt on him in less than a year.
And the thing was, despite his size, he was so agile.
Well, he had that, like, okay, I'll give you the best example. Yoko was only like around maybe 290, 300 when he first started, if that. Well, I go back to where I first started when I was 106, 7 pounds. It's a lot easier to learn that at a lighter weight and be able to learn how to do it as you get progressively bigger and thicker and heavier than the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Because you already have those neural pathways established. That's why he could, get off his feet very easily. Why he could run, move, hit the ropes. He had phenomenal agility and phenomenal flexibility to throw that savate kick, and also, he knew how, he'd put his time in and being able to learn how to work, learn psychology, learn timing, learn how to pace a match appropriately for a guy his size. So when he got bigger and thicker, if he did get blown up, he knew exactly what to do instead of getting anxious in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's how he ended up with the Yokozuna character.
Sweet.
But then again, it's like, a lot of the Samoans that got their foot in the door, they mostly did as tag teams, though, instead of a...
Afa and Sika.
Afa and Sika. And also, the head shrinkers kind of followed them, and they were managed by Afa after that because, there are so many people from, the territory days that watch Afa and Sika in WWF in the Garden, and they were legitimately scared of them, and for good cause, because Bobby Heenan said it best, talking about wildlife, when WWF had to become WWE because of the WWF lawsuit, World Wildlife Fund. He said, spend a week at the Hojo with Afa and Sika the Samoans. That's wildlife. Yep. Oh yeah, they were wild men, but they were also gentlemen at the same time. It's like they don't put up with no BS, and they'll put everybody in the bar to bed. Night night. Night night.
What did they drink?
Oh, brother. Probably anything and everything, knowing them. It's like, because there's a story that Scott Norton told when he was over in Japan. I think he was over in Japan with Haku, as a matter of fact. And they sat in front of a vending, like they weren't carding at the time for ID in Japan. I don't know how it is over there, but they were sitting in front of a. Actually, no, it was Yoko. Yoko, as a matter of fact, they were sitting in front of a vending machine, throwing in their yen and just sitting there drinking beer all throughout the night in the hotel lobby. Like yen, 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 and the machine just cleaning out the vending machine of beer. I think it was Asahi too. That's good stuff.
Good stuff.
Yep. But like most of the Samoans in that era, especially because they were playing up the Polynesian savage gimmick, which was, indicative of the times. A lot of them also had like managers with them, like they were managed by Captain Lou Albano the first run. And then like Offa actually becomes the manager of the head shrinkers, kind of like the second coming of the Wild Samoans in WWF. But then again, it's like, okay, we can't have Offa talking, so let's go ahead and bring Captain Lou back. But he was like 70 years old at that point. So, but yeah, it's like a lot of times the Samoans were really portrayed as being like savages and, not really civilized in those days, just how wrestling was at the time. But it's like nowadays, with how they're being portrayed, they're talking, they're, very eloquent, they're phenomenal athletes. They, instead of just going and chopping people and biting them and fighting them, they're actually going and wrestling them, like Jacob Fatu with his ability in the ring. Like he's like watching him do a moonsault. I feel like I'm watching, he does a moonsault very similar to, what's his name? It'll come to me, but it's like just how he did it, the way he walks, the way he moves, and the way that he also plays up. It's like, oh my God, this guy, when he gets, going, he's gonna kill you. But at the same time, he can talk, and he's treated like, he feels like he's the black sheep of the family. I love his gimmick.
Oh, yes.
So,
who do you think was the first one to break the stereotype of the Polynesian?
Yoko. Yoko, because even though he didn't say much, he mostly stood there and looked imposing. He looked like that he was focused and looked like he had a task at hand. So, especially Sumo Grand Champion, it's like you can't. How can I put this? You gotta be viewed as somewhat civilized to an extent to be able to pull off that. Yeah, stoic to be able to pull that gimmick off. So. But let's go ahead and go to another wrestling bloodline talk about, which, I just think of a really loud guitar strum when I think of this one. Let's go up north to the Hearts.
The Hearts.
Yes. Boy, I tell you what, Stu and Ellen sure had a lot of kids, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And they all wrestled or married wrestlers. So, which of the Hearts, I mean, obviously you grew up in the era of Brett and Owen, but which of the Hearts, aside from maybe those two, stands out to you as probably the best worker of the Hearts?
Ooh. Well, I haven't seen, like, Bruce or the other kids, other than that one match with the Knights.
Yep. Oh, God. Bruce tatered everybody in that match. Brett even said in his books, like, damn, Bruce was stiff in the ring. He was so stiff. And I watched him throw like a bulldog Larry on Shawn Michaels. Oh my God, he looked like he took his head off for real.
But the one that I most noticed when I was a kid was Brett, because I mean he had all the big matches and was a more technical wrestler.
He was kind of like the second coming of Dory Funk Jr., if you ask me.
Yeah.
Because Dory was the more serious, mat wrestler during his era, and that's what got him over at that point. He was all business. But then again, you have Terry, which, by the way, Brett actually spent a lot of time with the Funks when he was a teenager, in case you didn't know. Yeah, he'd go down to Amarillo, before then he'd go to the Boys Ranch, and he actually trained a little bit after he broke into business with the Funks down in Amarillo, spent a lot of time with Dory and Terry. I think this was after that they had their world title runs and all that, but they still had the territory going. And he'd go down there and, work out with them over the summer and have fun, be a cowboy down there.
which, by the way, was actually supposed to be Bret Hart's first gimmick when he was starting in WWF, was Cowboy Bret Hart. They wanted to make him. He's like, I don't want to be a cowboy. So that's why the Hart Foundation came about.
Nice.
But I always thought if he would have had the savvy to go and politic a little bit more, I think Owen could have been a bigger star than Bret.
Well, because he had more, I feel like he had more charisma than Bret.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the difference between Dory and Terry. They both had their individual charismas, but they were wildly different. Like Owen, would go and do. Owen was a natural ribber, of course, and he would rib people in the ring. It's like he'd hook a headlock and it's like, back me up to the ropes. Like, okay, give me a double, triple somersault monkey flip. And he just, they'd look at him like, what the F are you talking about? And he'd be like, he'd block the headlocks. Like, okay, go ahead and give me a triple, double tiger bomb, something like that. And it's like, what? It's like, oh, just clothesline me. But Owen was ribbing him in the ring. And there was also another time where he took a bunch of sardines from underneath the ring and put Bret in a Campbell clutch and shoved them down his mouth. But that's the kind of stuff that Owen kind of did. It's like, of course, he was a great wrestler, but he enjoyed the ribbing so much. But it's like, if Owen would have been the type of guy to go and it's like, hey, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. It's like, I think he could have gotten an even bigger push than Bret. But Owen was, personally, I heard, enjoyed being one of the boys more. And it's like, hey, that's his decision. So I think he enjoyed just being in the business instead of having a politic to be in the business. That makes sense?
Yeah.
But I always thought he was the most underrated wrestler I've ever seen in my life. So, because everything he did just looked so damn good.
Well, let's look at some of the other wrestlers that married into the Hart family, such as like the British Bulldog.
Of course, Davey. I tell you what, if you want to talk about the perfect power wrestler, it's Dave Bush Smith, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's like he had the athleticism. He could do head springs and drop kicks and, do the British style catch wrestling with the rolls, somersaults, the fancy wrist locks and all that. But he also had been kind of North Americanized too with the way he worked. Like he didn't work like a William Regal, like you would expect like a British guy or a European guy to do it. No, he would actually kind of
throw you around a bit.
Yeah, well, no, he was more the type of guy that worked more of an American style as far as pacing and bumping and all that. It's like vastly different. So, but of course, Dynamite Kid, he kind of worked the same way except smaller. He kind of was in his own day Darby Allin, where he'd use his own body as a weapon as opposed to going just wrestling, which of course he would do a lot of. But Jake Roberts said he was like a Wolverine on you, kind of like because Chris Benoit modeled his style a lot after Dynamite and was his favorite wrestler and all that. But he was married to married into the Hearts as well. And Davey and I bet didn't know this. Davey and Dynamite were actually cousins. First or second cousins, yeah. So, of course, we can't leave out Matilda.
Matilda.
Yeah.
Such a good girl.
Yep. Actually, there was one, we're going to have to say that one for another episode, which I actually think we need to do an episode on greatest ribs in wrestling. I'll go ahead and throw that out. But anyway, but yeah, it's like you had Davey marrying B.J. Annis, who is Teddy Hart's father. He married one of the Hart daughters, and that's how Teddy became a Hart. But yeah, man, it's like...
How's Jim the Anvil Neidhart related to the Harts?
he married Ellie Hart. Brett's,
okay.
Yeah, Brett's one of Brett's sisters. And of course, you end up with Natty and beautiful Jenny Neidhart, so... But yeah, it's like they put it best, like they're either wrestlers or married wrestlers.
Now, before we wrap up over here, I want to get into the Guerreros.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one that I don't know a lot about.
Well, it all started with Gory Guerrero, who was a star during the Mil Mascaras era in Mexico. And Gory actually immigrated to the LA, between LA and Texas. And he had 4 boys. He had Chavo, Mondo, Hector, and Eddie. And there is a huge generational gap between 3 and 4, which is Hector and Eddie, because Hector was like 15 years older than Eddie, and Chavo was already wrestling by the time Eddie was born. But Gory was kind of like as he was known for all these really fancy submission holds, and could shoot and do like catch style wrestling in there, but he also was, famous for the lucha. I've only seen Gory wrestle like maybe once or twice, but I've seen a lot of Chavo wrestling from like the territory days, from like Mid-South. And of course, he worked a lot with Roddy. I've seen a little bit of Hector's work. I haven't seen much of Mondo's, because Chavo was kind of the one that got most of the attention in that era. And then, of course, you have Eddie, who came along. And like I said, Eddie, even though he was in the same generation as his brothers, he wasn't, because his generation that he worked in came like the generation after his brothers. So even though he worked with his brothers a little bit and tagged with them all, completely different style, especially because he had a lot of Japan in his work. Like, Eddie was the most unique blend of a wrestler you'd see. America, Mexico, and Canada, or Japan, I mean to say, all mixed together in his style by how he works, how he puts on holds, the way he hits the ropes, his footwork, the way that he, transitions in and out of things. So it's like he was the most unique wrestler I've ever seen, stylistic-wise, being Khmerid. But I tell you what, like, Eddie, even his own brothers would say he was probably the best worker in the family. It's like,
Are there any third generation Guerreros?
well, Eddie's daughter did wrestling for a while. I don't know if she's still in the business or not, but obviously Chavo Jr., being Chavo Senior's son, and actually getting to tag with his son. And actually, do you remember when Chavo Classic was cruiserweight champion for a little bit?
Oh, no.
That would have been in 04. It went from Chavo to, I think Jacqueline actually beat him for the Cruiserweight title on SmackDown. Then Chavo Sr. actually went and beat Jacqueline, then went over to Rey Mysterio after that. But he was actually Cruiserweight champion in his late 50s, early 60s for about 2 weeks. Chavo Sr. was, so. And he could still do a moonsault, for crying out loud, at his age and his, physical state. But I tell you what, man, it's like, yeah, all these families in wrestling, tell you what, man, it's like, it really is a family business if you think about it, because of how they grew up in it.
Well, especially you see a lot of professional wrestlers today marrying within the business.
Yep.
Like, if you could, us, and give a quick rundown of couples in the current industry, like.
Well, Jordan Grace and Jonathan Gresham are a power couple. Undertaker, Michelle McCool, even though neither one of them's like actively wrestling now. Let's see who else. Well, Charlotte and Andrade were married for a second. Trying to think of all of them. Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins. Let's see who else. Mickey James and Nick Aldis. There's tons of them out there. So, but a lot of these people had already had success on their own first. So, to an extent, and of course, you can't leave out Triple H and Stephanie.
Yes.
But then again, I know Triple H, I know we're getting kind of close to where we're going to have to take it home, but I hear lots of people talking about how Triple H only got where he was in the industry because of him marrying Stephanie. It's like, but they don't pay attention that he was actually champion before they actually went and, hooked up. So,
Right.
like, I don't buy that.
I don't buy it. Alrighty, it's time to go home.
Okay, where's that darn pencil? I gotta remember to bring that pencil with me, even if it's one of those golf pencils.
Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, including Spotify and Spreaker and YouTube, where you can find us on Working the World 0240.
Yeah, a little tongue twister there.
Abba-dabba-da.
Hop-up-ba-de-lop. A little
Anyway.
scat for this, so. Can I use that word on the air, scat?
You can use scat.
Okay, good.
Alrighty. Take care, guys. Stay classy, and thanks for joining us.
Shoot the half.
Shoot the half.
'Cause I